The following program contains scenes and language of a frank and explicit nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Filmjitsu, the podcast that wields films like deadly weapons. We are your hosts. I am Mike.
And I am Jay.
On this week's episode of Filmjitsu, I tasked Jason with watching Alex Garland's 2022 Men. Not because I thought it was a bad movie, but because I was so perplexed by the film myself, I just had to hear what Jason had to say about it. Then we'll do our bottom 5 transformations before doing a little kick 2, pick 2, and finding out what Jason is going to have me watch for our upcoming episode. But before all that, let's go ahead and roll the trailer.
Hello.
Hi.
Mrs. Marlowe, yes?
Harper, yes.
Do, come in.
The words I have to say.
It's a beautiful house.
But they're true.
Would it just be you staying, or
Excuse me?
Mrs. Marlowe? No?
No.
Until you give your love, there's nothing more that we can do.
Apple from the garden?
Yeah, it was delicious.
No. Mustn't do that. Forbidden fruit.
Oh, God, sorry,
I'm joking.
Oh.
You're tormented.
Feels more like...
Haunted.
Yeah. He was stalking me.
What makes you say that?
I saw him twice.
Twice. I don't know if he saw you once.
Want to play a game? You hide, I'll seek.
You must feel an awful sense of guilt.
Stay away from me. What are you doing now?
Jay, we're going to have a lot to talk about today, and I gave you Men not for the usual reasons that we watch a movie. Most of the time, you and I are giving each other the terrible movies back and forth to try and really mess up each other's day. That wasn't my plan here, because Men was such a vexing film-going experience for me that I had to share. And I think that sometimes when my brain doesn't work, I need to ask your brain what I'm thinking. And so that's where we find ourselves. I saw Men in a theater right after the pandemic had sort of opened theaters back up, with myself and one stranger in the room. The movie played, the credits rolled. We sat there in utter darkness until the house lights came up. He turned and looked at me and asked, "Are you okay?" I told him I wasn't sure. And then we left silently.
Never to hear from each other again.
That's right.
Wow. Shared moment in space.
Maybe he's out there somewhere listening to this episode. That would be a real treat. I think before we get into the film too much, it actually does maybe help a little bit to talk about the plot. Following the death of her abusive husband, Harper rents an estate in the English countryside to process and heal. She then meets an odd assortment of the men who populate this town, who all look just like actor Rory Kinnear to the audience's eyes. And from there, we get the folk horror film that dives headlong into a cultural conversation about toxic masculinity and the trauma that women are forced to carry in its wake. I found this movie to be visceral, disturbing, an allegory that asks a menagerie of questions, and so many questions that for you, Jay, my question is this: do you have any answers to the questions that writer-director Alex Garland was giving us to uncover in this film?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that this is so I want to kind of talk a little bit about you giving me this film and just assuming that it's not the usual shit that we do, because this is the kind of movie that is going to be polarizing.
Absolutely.
There's an audience for this movie, and then there is certainly not an audience for this movie. And if you are somebody who likes your films linear and clear and not laced with metaphor, then you are not going to like this film. And for me, this is not a subtle film in any way. It's about as subtle as a jackhammer. I mean, it starts with the lead character, Harper, plucking an apple from a tree.
Right.
And then being admonished for it shortly afterward. It just really is all about this nature of patriarchal society and the penchant of it to slap women with blame for literally everything, including original sin itself. It's that patriarchy is merciless but obvious, and that's really what the movie is most interested in driving home, more than it is telling this story. There is a story. It's an interesting one. It's about Harper's grief. Harper is played wonderfully, by the way, by Jessie Buckley, who really has this incredibly difficult balance that she has to strike between being vulnerable, but being also very, very strong, and yet really just being an archetype. She's not really a character. She just represents women.
Sure.
Just as much as Rory Kinnear represents literally almost all of the men in the film. So, the movie I feel as though the movie isn't really asking any questions. It's just telling you flat out what it's like for women living in a society like ours. And that's really what it's going through. It does a very strange job of telling this story, but then again, it's Alex Garland. And if you've seen Ex Machina, or if you've seen Annihilation, I think this is very much part of his deal. Like, this really fits into his other work. I think he's gotten weirder.
Yes.
But I mean, like, I actually find Annihilation's ending a little weirder. And really, when you're talking about men, you almost need to like fast forward right to the end to talk about it. I mean, that was a very well chosen bottom 5 that you picked out for this, Transformations.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
So very clever. I don't want to talk about it right yet, but I will say that it isn't as weird as maybe the ending of Annihilation.
Sure.
So people who kind of, again, there's been a split really with this movie, Men. I think it rates at about 6.5 on IMDb. I've not yet said really what I've thought about it. I've only just been very expressly like, to me, it's a no-brainer. This is what it's about.
Yeah.
We can get into the particulars of what certain scenes mean and such, sure.
Yeah.
But the at the end of the day, you set it up very nicely, and I think that it does a good job of making you feel the kind of discomfort that women feel. I don't know why this was directed by a man. I have no idea why he wrote it either. I find it odd. It's probably very flawed because it is from a guy. But to me, it felt accurate as a person, as a feminist myself, as someone that looks at the struggles of my wife in the world and other women that I care about in this world. It didn't seem crazy to me. It seemed like a manifestation of fear and what it takes to be a strong woman in this society.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, the title tells us what we need to know. I don't know that it is strange that a man wrote this movie, because I'm not so sure that what this movie is about is what it's like to be a woman in the patriarchy. I think it has a lot to say about the way in which toxic masculinity is also harmful to men, in the way that men are responsible for their actions and their behaviors. I think maybe Alex Garland is processing his own role in toxic masculinity, and he's telling this story through this female. And you raised an interesting point, right? The performance of Jessie Buckley is both vulnerable and powerful, which is what women are tasked with being all of the time, right? We can almost go back to that America Ferrera speech from Barbie. All of these different things that women are supposed to be simultaneously.
Right.
They're attributes that I think we can put on Jessie Buckley and her performance. I also think they're attributes of Harper in this movie, but I think this is a film that is very confrontational. Men, even right there, you can almost hear the Twitterverse losing its mind when a movie called Men comes out. You go, oh boy, here we go, right? Without knowing anything about the movie. Now, the movie does have a lot to say about men, and the way in which it chooses to tell that story is fascinating. I think you're right. I think that there are not questions necessarily about what this movie's message is. I think there are a lot of questions about how it is delivering this message. Not necessarily what does it mean, but how does it tell us?
Yeah, it is the interpretation. What are we drawing from it in the weird events that transpire? The meaning is obvious, but why? Yeah. Why tell the story this way? And I think, again, we may see this differently. I think you're right. I think it is talking a little bit. I hadn't really considered that it could be talking about toxic masculinity. Obviously it is. But when I watch this movie and I'm feeling what the character of Harper is feeling, the filmmaking is very, very deliberate.
Yes.
The cinematography by Rob Hardy, who's a frequent collaborator of Alex Garland, he shot all of his movies. The goal really seems to be for both writer and director and cinematographer to center the movie on Harper, even in shots, center her, blur backgrounds, and make her both small and crushed by the surroundings.
Yeah.
There's almost like a spotlight that happens on her and a kind of vignetting that kind of goes around the frame with they do this tilt shift kind of thing where things are weirdly out of focus just around her. You think about something like that tunnel sequence where she's walking into the tunnel. She's so small and the tunnel is so large, and the tunnel's, both vaginal and phallic, I suppose, in some way. I'm sure there's some sort of meaning there as well. And she does that little bit of shouting that she does, and it sort of echoes unnaturally and then slaps back, and she adds another bit of melody to it.
Yeah.
That was a brilliant, brilliant piece that gets called back later, which I thought was just wonderful.
I think it's interesting in this scene in the tunnel when Harper is playing with her voice and she's literally finding her voice in this tunnel. And almost as soon as she does, we get a man at the end of the tunnel and she's punished.
Yeah, he's barking at her. And it's scary.
It is scary.
I felt threatened. I felt small. I felt like the world was closing in around me because that's how good the filmmaking is. And that's why I say maybe he is talking about toxic masculinity, but I do think it's through the lens of a woman. And I think it really is about what men make women feel.
And I want to talk then, we couldn't go any further really without discussing the big choice that this film makes, which is to have all of the men in the film pretty much played by actor Rory Kinnear.
Yeah.
He plays every man in the movie. And I'm not sure that that's how he looks to Harper. I think this is a storytelling device because I spent a little bit of time in the movie trying to figure out all the men in this town look alike. And then I noticed that Harper wasn't reacting to that. And what I think may have been going on, and this goes maybe to the questions that I came away with, is Harper seeing a variety of men in this town, but they all appear to us as the audience as this one man because Rory Kinnear is kind of an avatar for all of the forms of toxic masculinity.
To her, I think all men sort of look the same except for her husband.
Mm-hmm.
So all men look the same. All men are the same level of threatening, intimidating, condescending.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really what it's all about. We literally see the same man. I don't know if she necessarily does. I think she may, because I do feel as though, even though this has happened, it's a larger metaphor about what it takes as a woman to stake your claim in your life and embrace your grief and embrace your decision and live with it and contend with it. It's a fucking bloodbath for women to have to do this. And that's what we end with. We end with I guess, a literal bloodbath in many respects.
Right.
So I haven't given it much thought. I took it very much at face value that to Harper, all men are the same, except for her ex-husband, who also very much is the same.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, he too is birthed from the men who beget the men who beget the men who beget the men. And I think that's probably the next thing that, if you talk about the sort of gimmick, if you will, of Rory Kinnear playing all these parts, including the part of a child, a bad-mouthed child, which, that didn't really work when that segment.
No, I almost wonder though if that was intentional that way, because again, that was really the first time that I went, I go into a horror movie and I'm seeing that all of the men in town look like the same person, and I'm taking it very literally. The first time I watched the film, I thought, all the guys in town look like the same person. Even this child looks like a grown man. Harper's going to be really wigged out by that.
Nope.
It's this horror
not in the
element.
slightest.
And then on a second viewing, I realized that she doesn't even take note of it, which was the first time for me that it got me thinking, maybe Harper is seeing a teenage boy, and we as the audience continue to see Rory Kinnear. Because for us as the audience, it doesn't matter who the individual people are. We are just seeing this avatar for this toxic masculinity. And I think it's important to go through maybe the small handful of men in this movie and what they are, what they stand for, who they are to Harper. We have
Jeffrey.
We have James, the husband, at the very beginning, the one man you say that doesn't look like Rory Kinnear, is played by a different actor entirely. He's emotionally, physically abusive. He holds her emotionally hostage and makes her responsible for all of his actions, even in the end. And we'll talk about that ending, but even in the final moments of the film, he is still putting his victimhood onto her.
Oh, 100%.
I think Jeffrey is the stand-in for that, the good guy, right? The chivalrous good guy that he wants to be nice, but he's infantilizing her. He wants to protect her.
Exactly.
He refuses to let her buy a drink. Your money's no good here. He politely inquires about her relationship status. I saw Jeffrey as kind of an incel, right?
Yeah, big time.
He's the guy who is so nice to Harper that at the end of the film, he feels like she owes him something. And we finally see this boil over in rage at the end of the film. Yeah,
it was very incel. And not only that, he actually refers to his father and how his father didn't approve of him, didn't think he was man enough.
Right.
So that forces him to go out and be the man to stand up for her. And it was a neat moment for sure.
Yeah.
And then he boils over and, of course, chases her with her own car.
Right. Yeah. I think the vicar, who I don't know, did you take it, the man at the end of the tunnel when Harper is playing with her voice, finding her voice?
Yeah.
I think that may have been the vicar. He was wearing clothes. The guy that she finds in the woods later is bare ass naked.
Yeah, I thought it might be the child. I think it could have been any one of them. That, again, it doesn't matter. Men,
the only reason I ask is because, again, the next time he appears, Harper's in the church and she screams. She's having this huge catastrophic emotional reaction, and she's using her voice, and that is when the vicar appears, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And this guy is just deep-seated sexual repression and rage.
Yeah.
gaslighting Harper. He's blaming her. He's putting all this guilt on her, making her think that everything that happened to her husband, James, was her fault.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the movie, blames her for his lust towards her, even though she has given him zero sexual attention, right? He assaults her and then justifies that sexual violence as being her fault.
Yeah.
Another form of toxic masculinity. And I think the boy is a little bit simpler. I think the boy is treating Harper like a plaything, like an object for his amusement, and he lashes out at her when she doesn't want to play along.
Well, he's the next generation of men.
I think all these men are the ingredients of this toxic stew that ultimately boils over back into James at the end of the film. James is all of these men. All of these men are James.
That's right. She has reached a conclusion in her grief. At the end of this, she realizes that she stood up to James, that she has soaked in the guilt and in the sadness of his passing, his rather traumatic passing too. I mean, that is a horrific bit of filmmaking. And Garland starts with it really early on in the film. It's almost right at the beginning, just to show you how often Harper's thinking about the passing of her husband.
Right.
You see this bizarre shot right at the beginning from the red. It's very tinged red. So it's completely opposite the English countryside, lush greens and the grays of the country house. You get this vibrant sunset that's happening. The room is bathed in a reddish hue. And then she's looking out a window with blood red coming out of her nose, and then her husband's face as he's falling. And you know, this movie comes so close to being unintentionally funny so many times. Again, we talked a little bit about the little kid effect. There's the fall in the slow motion where they look at each other, where the context is damn near funny. Like, I didn't find it funny, but I could see that somebody else would.
There's a lot of that in the movie. In a lot of those, I think that even in the final sequence where we are having these men birthed over and over, it's almost that it almost becomes a bridge too far. But because I had questions about what Garland was up to, I actually went and found a couple interviews with him. And he said that that ending was written in terms of mutations. And he was struggling with how he wanted to depict these mutations of the characters, and decided, in his words, to lean fully into the ridiculous. He said it made him think more deeply about the themes of the film, those thematic elements of mutations, and he relied on the visual effects team to make it work in post-production. But I think you're right. He does, in a lot of points in the movie, I think, lean into the ridiculous and really flirts with sometimes getting into a very, very, very dark humor. I don't think for me he ever goes over that line, but I hear what you're saying. There are parts that you could say are unintentionally comical in the darkest possible way.
Yeah, I think that having men suddenly sprout vaginas and birth full-grown men is perhaps a bridge too far for almost anybody that watches a movie, I guess, except for me. Because when I was watching it, I just went, this is bonkers for sure.
Yep.
But considering the transformation of the stalker character, which I guess is considered the green man, and it's sort of a totem, if you will, of grieving, the rebirth that happens after grieving. He plays a part. The blood that's all over the place is the blood of her acceptance, not of men, not of her role, but of herself and how she is going to live further and forward in a world that clearly isn't interested in anything that she's doing, that she is.
Yeah.
It is a world full of male agenda that is in many ways faceless. It doesn't matter what they look like.
Right.
You know, the only one that stood out from all of them is the one that she had a very close personal relationship with, and it nearly killed her to leave the man, but she had to.
Right.
And she was like, and then he tries to put his suicide on her the way he does. So she's like, no, I'm out of it. I'm done. This movie is about a woman who is fucking fed up with men. They've tried to get what they want from her, but Harper, and I think it's important indeed, her friend who is with an unborn child at the very end, they're done with being what's expected of them. No matter how fucked up everything gets, they're going to fight and they're going to win. And that is what, for me, Men is about. Is it crazy? It's crazy. Visually, it's nuts. Is the metaphor leaned in too heavily? Yeah, at times. I think the visuals, the birthing sequence is bonkers. I'm not sure. It seems like the really gratuitous stab through the arm and then the pull back from the mail slot. There's a sequence where the stalker sticks his hand through a mail slot, and then she stabs him and he pulls his hand back and it severs his hand right down all the way from forearm all the way down to his fingers. And he has this weird split that all of those incarnations then have.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the film's way of telling us that all of these men are the same men again.
Are the same man. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
But it also gives a little bit more to this idea of the green man in these sort of mutations, the mutations of men, the different flavors of men that ultimately all want the same thing. And I think that I think it's an interesting film. I think you do walk away from it at the end feeling better having watched it, even though you've been grossed out, frightened, because it is a horror film.
It is. It sure is. Yeah, it is.
And I felt many times over very uncomfortable throughout it, both as a man and as an empathetic person that really could feel the fear that she was feeling. It's a very uncomfortable experience, and for that reason alone, it's a good Filmjitsu pick. And that was what I was trying to say at the beginning, was that this thing is polarizing. I could see half the people that come to our show going, oh, fucking Santo had to watch Men. Right.
I had no idea. It is a very polarizing kind of film. And you might have come at me saying, you know what? This is all just pretentious drivel. And I think a fair argument may be able to be composed on that basis. That's not the way that I see the film, but I think certainly a certain kind of person could make that argument if they wanted to. I'm so relieved to find out that you and I are aligned on this movie, and that's why it is a unique departure from the usual Filmjitsu thing. I am sure we will get back to our regular garbage real soon, but I guess I want to end with the words of Alex Garland himself, who said that this film was designed to not tell the audience what to be thinking, but to have a conversation with them, so that it was more of a conversation than a lecture. And on that count, I think Men succeeds gloriously.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Mike, after the serious discussion that we just had about Alex Garland's Men, I'm not even sure what podcast we're on anymore. Is this still Filmjitsu? Are we?
I think it is.
Are we still here?
I think so.
Well, good, because I can't wait to do a bottom 5 list and get silly again. So here we are. You picked what I think is such a clever bottom 5 for this one. Bottom 5 transformations ties right into that weird ass ending of Men. So I would love to know what your approach was for this.
I guess I'm a little all over the place. I didn't give myself too many rules. I thought about a lot of different things.
Vaginas? Are there vaginas in all of yours?
I don't think there are vaginas in all of mine.
Okay.
Although there are a couple of dickheads in my number 5, because getting us right back on that Filmjitsu track, my number 5 is here because while it is ridiculous, it's also kind of awesome. I am going with John Travolta and Nicolas Cage and the face swap in the movie Face Off. And ladies and gentlemen, Filmjitsu is back.
I've been chasing this guy ever since I joined the force. He has no conscience, and he shows no remorse. He's the mastermind behind numerous bombings and political assassinations. There's a felony list a mile long: murder, arson, kidnapping, terrorism, you name it. He's the most dangerous and brilliant criminal mind I've ever known. For years, I've been watching him, tracking him, studying his every move. I know his every mannerism, facial tic, gesture. I know him better than he knows himself. And now, after all this time, I finally figured out a way to trap him. I will become him.
It's this outlandish, bloated, essentially A-list drive-in movie. But come on. They swap faces, but in doing so, apparently they also swap skeletons because they have, like, their teeth are now different. Their body types are completely different, but those are now swapped. They use this hokey microchip voice changer thingy to explain why the voice sounds like the other guy. It's all very stupid, but it's also pretty fun. And so
it's awesome. It's so awesome. This movie is so much ridiculous fun. That is such a terrific choice. I really struggled with this bottom 5 because I was really thinking about changes and transformations. That's like a forced transformation that both guys make. That is such a great choice. Well done. Well done. My number 5 is really a choice made by a very furious 14-year-old me. It's the transformation of Evil Dead into Evil Dead 2. When I was a kid, I loved the original Evil Dead. It scared the bejesus out of me. There were so many terrifying and memorable moments. I guess I completely missed the comedy of the film. You know, its abrupt end and that use of that upbeat Charleston swing song at the end. It shocked me, but I kind of figured it was Sam Raimi and the guys of the Deadites telling us, hey, they're all dead and it's time to party.
Yeah.
So with so much unrelenting gore and jump scares, the Evil Dead, despite the limits of its budget, seemed hell-bent on giving viewers nightmares. And when it was announced that Evil Dead 2 was coming in 1986, I was very eager for more horror, more terror.
Right.
And what I got was Three Stooges-like slapstick comedy, way less scares. And instead of a continuation of the first movie's story, it was essentially a beat-by-beat rehash of everything we'd seen.
Right.
In fact, like Raimi even went as far as redoing many of the key scenes from the first movie now that he had the deeper pockets of Dino De Laurentiis behind him.
Dino's back, baby. We're talking about Dino again.
Oh, man, it's great to be able to do this. 2 shows running. I was so mad. I hated Evil Dead 2.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, it held the prize for the most disappointing sequel until I saw Alien 3 in 92. But, of course, over the years, and especially with like the release of Army of Darkness, I came to appreciate Evil Dead 2 for the comic insanity that it is, right? But you want to talk about bottom 5 transformations? I would just have to include when one of my favorite horror movies was transformed into a goddamn goof.
Huh. Wow. Well, my number 4, I went with one of those performances where an artist drastically changes their body for the role. Specifically in this one, I am going with Christian Bale's physical transformation for the movie The Machinist.
Yeah.
Stop doing this shit. Suffering
gross.
These extreme physical transformations for movies, it's not heroic. It isn't sacrificing yourself for your craft. It's foolish and dangerous and dumb. Bale lost 63 pounds, going down to 120 pounds. Apparently, he ate only a can of tuna and an apple a day. There has got to be a better way to get nominated for a Saturn Award or whatever than that. I'm sorry. It's just, I don't understand. It's too much for me. Also, the film grossed $8 million worldwide. So,
yeah.
Not that, box office is the mark of success, but Hotel for Dogs made 117 million. Meet the Fockers made 552 million. So what are you killing yourself for? Love of the game? Okay. It's not for me. It is not for me. I don't think that I don't think that when an actor makes these huge physical transformations that become the conversation about the movie, and it sucks all of the attention away from the filmmaker's film, and it becomes a kind of a tabloid story about Christian Bale eating tuna and apples. That's not for me. So
that's exactly it.
That transformation is my number 4.
And what's amazing is nobody ever saw the movie. It's actually a pretty good movie by director Brad Anderson, who's from around here.
Yeah.
So he's from the Boston area. And in fact, I worked with Brad many, many moons ago on a film for this guy named Frank Quaglia. And Brad was in charge of like a video unit where he was interviewing people, and I was in charge of a Super 8 film unit. I must have been about 19 at the time. So I've always watched Brad's career and sort of seen where he's gone. I felt really bad about what happened with The Machinist, and I felt as though this stunt didn't leave any space for anyone else. It still appears on all sorts of lists about filmmaking, specifically about like what actors do for a part. But again, nobody really sees the movie, and that's a real shame.
Yeah,
so
it is a good flick. You're right.
Great choice. Great choice. Definitely see what you're doing with your list. You're going in many different directions, as Mike does.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, my number 4 is the most obvious, I think, that I get with my list. And I wonder if it's also on yours, because there are very few transformations. Well, do I really need to say anything about the prequel trilogy of Star Wars other than this? No.
Oh, boy.
After slogging through 3 overly plotted and overlong CGI choked movies about the genesis of the biggest, baddest motherfucker in all of Star Wars, we get a charred up Anakin on an operating table surrounded by goofy ass robots that snap all those iconic pieces into place. And then here we are, finally about to give rise to the Darth fucking Vader, and we get no with his arms up in the air like he was watching the Sith soccer club lose to Real Madrid. Fucking Vader's first moment was him mourning the loss of Padme in the silliest way possible, and this one just it makes the list for the sheer magnitude of the failure. So at number 4, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
Well, sir, this for a while was sitting in the number 1 spot on my list.
Yes, I knew we were going to.
Now, it didn't ultimately make it. And for me, it wasn't even just about it was that this transformation from Anakin to Vader.
Oh, the whole thing.
It caused all 3 of these movies to exist. It's the prequels are that story. And we all know how it's going to turn out because we saw New Hope. So it's this long, drawn-out shenanigans to getting to no. And so it was actually in the number 1 spot on my list for a while. I pulled it because I was dead ass sure that it was going to be somewhere on your list. Now, I had another movie in the number 1 spot that I also pulled from my list because I am convinced I know what your number 1 is going to be.
Oh my God.
But I'm not here to talk about my number 1 yet. I'm here to talk about number 3.
Okay.
Spider-Man 2, where a nerdy Jamie Foxx. And I mean, come on, a nerdy let's just start a nerdy Jamie Foxx. We'll start right there, right? That
was good.
It might deserve it. No, transforming Jamie Foxx into a nerd almost belongs on this list by itself. Jamie Foxx is just like sex magic all the time, but whatever. So he plays this nerd who falls into a vat of CGI electric eels and becomes Electro. Even the gap in his nerdy teeth is for some reason fixed when he falls into this vat of eels. This sucks. It sucks for a few reasons. The CGI is terrible.
Okay.
Fox's switch from a nerd to a badass, like the change in the character, is dumb.
That is dumb.
The character never overcomes how laughably bad the transformation is, so you never take him seriously as a bad guy. This was the low watermark for the Spider-Man franchise, and it kind of killed the whole thing for me.
Well, my number 3 is the Santa Claus from 1994. Look, am I the only one who finds the whole idea behind the Santa Claus dark as fuck? Like the way that Santa has been immortal all these millennia are because he dies and then someone else just puts the suit on and becomes him.
Jason, it's Highlander. That's Highlander.
Oh, I was thinking it was the jolly old Saint Nick's version of Night of the Creeps.
Yeah.
You know, it's the physical transformation that Tim Allen's character makes is pretty alarming. Like, he puts on a ton of weight. He cannot say no to like sweets, and he can't shave the beard. Like, that beard just keeps popping back, the big white beard.
Weight can fluctuate from year to year.
Fluctuate? You make it sound like I'm retaining water. I've gained 45 pounds in a week. Pete, what's happening to me?
What's your diet like?
Milk and cookies.
Really?
But I don't finish all the milk.
Well, then there is your problem. Just try to cut back on the sweets, okay? Anything else?
Yeah. How fast does hair grow? Facial hair.
What?
I shave in the morning, in the afternoon, I look like this.
Well, it could be a hormonal imbalance.
That would explain the mood swings.
Mood swings?
Yeah, but look at my hair. It's turning gray.
Oh, it's middle age, buddy. It happens. And with that body, you should be thankful you have hair. Look, if it bothers you, you can dye it, and you should dye it.
And plus, like, just by looking at children, he knows if they're naughty or nice. Like, he knows what list they're on. But I think the biggest indignity that he suffers in his transformation to Santa Claus is that he restores belief in Santa for his ex-wife and her new shrink husband, played by Judge fucking Reinhold. You know, like great, you're doing favors for Judge Reinhold, like post 80s Judge Reinhold. That's a real gift. But I found it a load of crap. Santa dies at the beginning of this movie, and we watch as the parasitic magical nature of Kris Kringle devours Scott's life until he's fucking arrested and broken out of prison by elves. Like, you know, if this isn't a terrible transformation, I don't know what is.
The movies also transformed into two other movies, which blows the fact that there was a franchise here is just insane to me.
Yeah, well, Tim Allen had that last laugh all the way to the bank, man.
Well, for my number 2, I couldn't make it through this list without werewolves represented somewhere. We've had a lot of great werewolf effects in cinema and some really, really bad ones. Remarkably, maybe the best and worst exist within the same franchise.
Yes, I know exactly where you're going with this.
Yes, because if the work of Rick Baker in American Werewolf in London is some of the very best we've ever seen, then that shitty, uninspired CGI transformation in An American Werewolf in Paris is some of the worst.
Oh, it's garbage.
Who do they think they are? I'm not sure if you can recall what CGI looked like in 1997. Mortal Kombat Annihilation, I'm looking at you. The audacity that it takes to try and one-up Rick Baker's most famous effects work is mind-boggling. It would be like if Harry Styles tried to write Thriller Part 2 using only suggestions from that Microsoft paperclip. That's what it would be.
I tended to stay away from any of the larger transformation sequences that are sort of known commodities for being shitty.
Yeah.
But I say that, and in the next breath, my number 2 is The Breakfast Club. And of course, it's Allison's makeover by Claire to win over a jock. I think we recently discussed this. Like, it might have been during Glenn or Glenda's episode or something.
The only reason it wasn't on my list was because we just talked about it in Bratz.
Oh, it was on Bratz. Jeez, wow.
That's
so
right.
Really recent.
Yeah.
Well, this was such a tone-deaf move in an otherwise smart and well-handled treatment of teen life. When Claire turns gothy outcast Allison into an allegedly appropriate-looking girl for a jock to like,
yeah,
I felt like a little piece of me die. Like, dandruff aside, Claire was quirky and super attractive as she was. And post-transformation, she was like milquetoast, a dime a dozen gal in pastels with boring hair. We shouldn't judge Claire on how she looks, but we also shouldn't applaud her being forced into acceptability by society. If anything, you know, Brian, he should have earned the shot at Claire.
Yeah.
Not Emilio Estevez. It should have been Anthony Michael Hall. Even Ali Sheedy herself said of the final form of Claire, quote, "I never liked the makeover. Listen, it was Hollywood in the 80s. They wanted to take the ugly duckling and make her into a swan. As far as I was concerned, that wasn't what I was doing with that character, but that was what they wanted." Apparently both Sheedy and Molly Ringwald, who played Claire, tried to get writer-director John Hughes to change the ending, having Claire instead take off the layers that she was hiding under.
Uh-huh.
But he held firm, and well, that's why it's number 3 on my list of bottom 5 transformations.
Well, we are at my number 1, and it's not the thing that I think is maybe perhaps the objectively correct answer for a bottom 5 transformation. I'm really waiting to see if it's your number 1. This was the one that I bumped Anakin and Darth Vader off for. And that is Eddie Murphy's career from 1996 to 2007. The lost decade in a comedy icon's career, from the Nutty Professor to Norbit, when Eddie thought he had to transform into 10 different characters in every damn movie. If he wasn't voicing a talking donkey one of the 11 times he's done that, he was putting on fat suits. He was putting on old lady fat suits, old man fat suits, fat lady fat suits, fat fella fat suits, and at least one time he dressed as an old Chinese man who wasn't fat. But what in the name of Jerry Lewis does Eddie Murphy think he's doing there? Honestly, some of these movies deserve their own Filmjitsu episodes. Norbit, we might have to talk about at some point. It's unforgivable. Eddie played multiple characters early in his career in Coming to America, but those weren't just bellowing fat suits. He was doing character work in those, but his transformations into a series of loud, obnoxious stereotypes in one fat suit after another for a decade makes that transformation my number 1.
Excellent choice. Yeah, for sure. He just kept going to the well and coming up dry. It was terrible. Well, my number 1 is going to be contentious. Perhaps the most contentious. In fact, I know it is the most contentious thing that we ever talk about, because you and I have argued about T2 pretty much for the entirety of our 20-year friendship.
We're not doing this.
You're still wrong when you say that T2 is a good movie, but we're not here to discuss that right now. Instead, let's discuss how writer-director James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger created the most convincing, unstoppable killing machine ever committed to film in The Terminator, and then turned it into a joke-quipping dear old dad to the horrendously awful Eddie Furlong's John Connor. From one movie to the next, the change in Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor from crying, screechy damsel in distress to badass warrior is what earns the most ink. But for me, the transformation of the T-800 is what I'll always remember most about the movie.
Watching John with the machine, it was suddenly so clear. The Terminator would never stop. It would never leave him. And it would never hurt him. Never shout at him or get drunk and hit him or say it was too busy to spend time with him. It would always be there, and it would die to protect him. Of all the would-be fathers who came and went over the years, this thing, this machine, was the only one who measured up. In an insane world, it was the sanest choice.
It's so fucking awful. But anyway.
We are not doing this. Listen, we have made an oath to each other that the final episode of this show will be this argument. You're not baiting me into it here today.
Anyway, all right.
Well, we've made it this far, and I guess now we just have to say it. It is, perhaps we were both dancing around it, unimaginable that the Brundlefly didn't make it onto this list.
No.
Just unimaginable.
What? Are you crazy? The Brundlefly is one of cinema's best transformations.
Yes, but that's exactly why it should have been on this list, because it is so absolutely terrifying. It is, if one were to be transformed if you were to go through a transformation, the last thing you would ever want to have happen to you would be to turn into the Brundlefly, right?
Peeling his nails off like they were stickers.
This to me is easily the worst transformation a character goes through anywhere in a movie. I would fall into a vat of eels 1,000 times before I would turn into a Brundlefly.
Well, I'm really glad that we got through that bottom 5 without coming to blows, although me bringing up T2, I thought it might.
That's dirty pool.
Because here we are, now we've got to battle it out over a game of kick 2, pick 2. What do we got this time? Are you keeping with the theme? Are we going to be talking about men with vaginas? What do we got?
We are not going to talk about men with vaginas. Maybe we might. No. I decided that I was going to go for our pick 2, kick 2, stay in the lane, and we are going to do body horror. So the 4 films. Okay. And I thought a lot about this, and I thought a lot about you when I did this.
Mm-hmm.
So the 4 options are Videodrome.
There's immediately Videodrome, like immediately.
Yeah. Altered States.
Oh shit.
Reanimator.
Oh, you motherfucker.
And Eraserhead.
Oh, that's a really tricky one. You know, it's funny. In all of our talking about men, we didn't bring up Cronenberg, and we didn't call anything Cronenbergian. And it didn't feel Cronenbergian. There is a lot of body horror in it, but it was so tied into the overall themes of the film.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think much about Cronenberg.
No, I didn't either. Yeah.
Videodrome, I actually really like for a variety of reasons. It's a freaky mess of a movie. I love the pirate cable TV idea.
Mm-hmm.
This whole idea of James Woods being this slimy dealer of shit that he's picked up off of like the airwaves and recorded on videotapes. And then he's putting videotapes inside of himself and withdrawing guns. Like it is a bizarre movie. It has Debbie Harry with like auburn hair. She's one of the most gorgeous women in the history of all things. Yeah. Hard to shake Videodrome. Eraserhead, so freaky, so upsetting, so personal. I think I could kick it because I don't know that I ever necessarily want to watch it again.
Sure. We talked about it before on the show. Yeah, we discussed that one before.
With the bottom 5 puppets.
That's right.
Yeah. So I don't have a problem kicking that one. I am going to keep Videodrome. I want to hear what you're going to do.
I am going to also keep Videodrome. I think
you are.
I think you articulated it really well. Altered States is not a movie that I love the way that you do, and I see Altered States and Videodrome maybe being the 2 most similar to one another out of the 4 on this list. There's that kind of techno horror kind of thing a little bit. I decided that I wanted to keep Videodrome, and so I'm down to Reanimator and Eraserhead.
Oh,
it's tough for me, I think, to turn my back on a David Lynch film, but he's not known for body horror, right?
No.
And I think Reanimator out of all of these on this list is probably the one that is sort of the most thinly categorized. I don't know. It's not one that just jumps right out as body horror.
I would say where this my kick 2, pick 2, and I were assigned this, instead of Reanimator, I would have used Stuart Gordon's From Beyond, which is very body horror, where,
right.
you know, Dr. Proteus grows all these weird arm, like his weird arms, like his ribs come out, and he's got the one guy's got the pineal gland. I think it's Jeffrey Combs has the pineal gland like popping out of his forehead, and you know. So to me, that is. But I mean, I think Reanimator fits as body horror because there are bodies everywhere. There's a body walking around with a head in his hands.
I will tell you, it's going to be my pick. I'm going to go with Reanimator.
You're going with Reanimator.
I always tend to lean towards the horror comedy. You know, that's
yeah, you do.
Yeah,
much more than I do.
Absolutely. And so for me, I'm going to go with Videodrome and Reanimator.
That's good from like a standpoint of a nice balance of two different types of films, you know? For me, because Altered States really is truly one of my absolute favorite films, there's no way I could kick it.
So Jason went with Videodrome and Altered States. I went with Videodrome and Reanimator, which means of the four, it is only David Lynch's Eraserhead that's going to find itself shut off into the Phantom Zone. As always, we would love to hear what your pick two, kick two are. So go ahead and drop us an email, hit us up on social media, grab your phone and open up that voice memo app and leave us a quick voice memo. Send it to us, Mike@filmjitsu.net, Jay@filmjitsu.net, and let us know what your pick two, kick two would be for our body horror category.
Mike, after you handed me Men to Watch, you mentioned that the next filmic switchblade I used on you might benefit from a proximity to Mother's Day. And you even suggested slyly that I might pair this week's deep dive into Men with another artful, explosive, and heavily metaphorical freakout by an auteur director, that being Mother from Darren Aronofsky and starring Jennifer Lawrence.
Safe to say you didn't do that?
Well, no, that's not a bad idea, and it would indeed be thematically similar and also would tie to the holidays. So in honor of Dia de los Madres, you're going to watch not Mother, because fuck no, that would let you off way too fucking easy. Sorry, pal, you're watching Mamma Mia.
Oh, no.
And you know what you get for trying to con your way into a good, interesting movie experience while on my watch?
What?
You get a post-James Bond Pierce Brosnan singing ABBA tunes on the Greek Isles. That's right,
no.
pal. For our next episode, you're watching the 2008 Jukebox musical starring Brosnan, Colin Firth, Stellan Skarsgård, Amanda Seyfried, Christine Baranski, and, of course, Meryl fucking Streep.
How do I get another Meryl Streep movie? How do you keep doing this to me?
I bet you never thought you'd see Karen Blixen sing The Winner Takes It All, but guess what? You're about to.
Oh, no.
Now,
cool.
Back when I was forced to watch Cats by your merciless ass, I admitted that I suffer horrible bouts of vicarious embarrassment when I watch musicals.
Right.
But truth be told, I cringe at more than just when people sing. And I think you'll find there's plenty in Mamma Mia that will make you want to hide your face from view beyond those who can't carry a tuna as if it were in a bag. So for the next episode, we're going with bottom 5 cringiest moments in film.
Jason, this is an episode in which we talked about vaginas and the Terminator and Meryl Streep. So really, even though I think we felt a little bit out of our element talking about men, we're still Filmjitsu when you get right down to it. Well done here. This is, I think, exactly the palate cleanser that this show is going to need coming off of something as serious as Men. It's also like really shitty retribution for Cats. I know what you're up to. I could sense that maybe you were worried this movie was going to get added to your plate one day. So you're really covering a lot of territory here with this. I am impressed. I guess I thought I was going to go my whole life without ever having to watch Mamma Mia. And I was wrong. So I hope that everybody will come back. This might be my cringe moment. I'm going to.
You're already hiding.
I have to explain to my wife, listen, I'm watching Mamma Mia, but it's for the show. It's not because I want to. The whole thing. Cool. I get it. Am I allowed to at least maybe watch it with my daughter or something like that?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. All right, great. So
I'll grant you that bit of grace.
She's not going to be interested. This sucks. Okay. Well, I hope everybody will come back and join us next time when I will be watching Mamma Mia. Until then, we have been your hosts. I am Mike.
And I am Jay. We'll see you next time.
Karate, karate. Stalno mislim na te, hoću znat sve kate, vježbat ću sate i sate. Karate, vježbat ću dok zadnji mi kjaj zostane izađe.
Like Mike's not making dick and fart jokes. What are we gonna do?
That's the problem. There were no dick and fart jokes to be made in that film.
There were vagina jokes. We should have talked about queefing. He queefed a man out of himself.
Nobody should ever talk about that. Good Lord.